In a stunning turn of events, the Confederation of African Football has overturned Senegal's triumph at the 2025 Africa Cup of Nations to instead award it to the losing finalists and hosts then of Morocco, a decision that, in my opinion, leaves a stain on African football in terms of the optics, whichever way you want to slice it. Anyways, good morning to you everyone and welcome back to the Football Tribe UG channel. Robert Kesakos is my name and I come to you from Kampala, Uganda. Yes, as we went to bed last night after the UEFA Champions League night games, the CAF did announce their decision upon appeal from the Moroccan Federation that they had overturned the decision for Senegal to be champions of Africa Cup of Nations 2025 and awarded the trophy to Morocco. Now, according to the rules, this was made based on the rules upon appeal because the Moroccan Federation did make an appeal to the CAF citing rules 82 and 84 that talk about forfeiture of the game and what the punishment there should be. That's what CAF based on. According to a statement released by the Confederation of African Football, they said that the Confederation Africaine de Football Appeal Board decided today that in application of Article 82 of the regulations of the CAF Africa Cup of Nations, the Senegal national team is declared to have forfeited the final match of the Total Energies CAF Africa Cup of Nations, AFCON, in brackets, Morocco 2025, in brackets, the match, with the result of the match being recorded as 3-0 in favor of the Fédération Royale Marocaine de Football. That's FRMF there. Now, guys, before I go into any details beyond that brief statement, because it does continue to state the other guiding principles upon which the CAF based to make their decision, I must say this does not look good for anyone involved. Not for Senegal, not for Morocco, not for CAF at one bit. Because whereas I may not agree with what happened in the final, whereas I may believe that what happened in the final was in itself a stain on African football, I do not think that there is anybody that is going to acknowledge Morocco as champions of AFCON 2025 in the manner in which things played out in that final. I don't think there's a lot of people that are going to acknowledge Morocco as the champions of the Africa Cup of Nations for last year, because the decision in itself has come 2 months after Senegal celebrated their triumph. For those of you that remember, let's have a recap of what played out in the final before we even get to our views. So we had the final played out. That was I think it was on January the 18th, when the final was played in Morocco. And Senegal won by 1-0 after that goal scored by Pape Gueye early on into extra time. Now, before extra time, prior to extra time, there had been controversial moments in the game. Earlier on, the referee had blown his whistle for a foul before Senegal went on to score what should have been a correct goal. Mark my words, the referee had blown his whistle before Senegal went on to score what should have been a right goal. Therefore, the incident could not be reviewed by video assistant referee or by VAR because the referee had blown his whistle prior to that. Then, when Morocco got a corner kick within the dying minutes of the game on the other side, Malik Diop fouled Brahim Diaz in the box, which resulted into a penalty that was awarded upon the referee being summoned to the monitor. Now, the referee of the day was Jean-Jacques Ndala Ngambo from the Democratic Republic of Congo. He was summoned to the VAR, or to the pitchside monitor, to go and review the incident because he had not seen it in real time. Moroccan players had tried to appeal for that incident prior to him being called to the pitchside monitor. So he runs to the pitchside monitor and he comes out with what I regarded, in my opinion, to have been the right verdict, which was a penalty. Now, the Senegalese players protested the decision. which is normal in football to protest a decision. Oftentimes, when decisions are given against teams, teams will protest those decisions, either in disbelief or in disagreement that a decision has gone against them. But seldom do you see players walk off the pitch, because once that decision is given against Senegal, Papa Thiaw, that is the Senegalese national team head coach, decided to summon his players off the pitch, and they went to the dressing room in protest of that decision. We had a spell of about 10 minutes for where football came to a standstill because Senegalese players walked off the pitch in protest of that decision. Because in the back of their minds, or at least in their interpretation, they felt that the referee was being biased against them. Was he being biased against them? That is subjective, because it is your view or your perspective against mine. Now, I do want to believe that for the entirety of the game, until that moment when he decides to award a foul, yet in actual sense, it was, I think, Achraf Hakimi that had committed the foul than vice versa, was a bit contentious. But it is normal. It's a 50-50, it's a 50-50. It wasn't as blatant that there's a blatant foul on a Moroccan player or on a Senegalese player, and then you had the decision the other way around. It wasn't that straightforward. So I thought, yeah, we let it slide, let them play on. And when those players protested and walked off the pitch, like I said, it took about 10 minutes or so. Sadio Mane and his comrades decided to run to the dressing room, summon the Senegalese players back, and they agreed to play on. Morocco came back and agreed to play on, and they took their penalty through Brahim Diaz, for which he took a penanka. Benjamin Mendy saved the penalty, or got the ball, and we played on before going into extra time, for which very early on Pape Gueye scores. Now, two important things for me, in my opinion. Whereas according to the rules, or whereas according to this decision, CAF appears to have followed the rules to the letter, it is wrong, in my opinion, optically. Why? First of all, it paints a bad picture about African football. Two, why was this decision not arrived on earlier? Because it's not like the rules were rewritten in the aftermath of the AFCON final. The minders of the game knew what the rules were. I do not think it would have required the appeal of the Moroccan Federation for them to arrive to this. Because one is going to hide behind that, well, Morocco had not contested this, but they contested it later on appeal, and their appeal was primarily based on the charges that were levied against them, including fines in the aftermath of the shenanigans of that final, including fining the Moroccan Federation for what the ball boys had done and their player Ismail Salabia. So really, was it too hard for CAF, with their respective bodies and officials, to interpret the rules as is, then in real time, within those 10 minutes, or to even wait on the game to say, Senegal, you walked off the pitch, therefore you lose the game by forfeiture? So, in other words, you've had Senegal win the Africa Cup of Nations, been awarded the trophy, been awarded the medals, they've gone on to celebrate, they went back to Senegal, had a trophy parade, and 2 months later, you're summoning them saying, look here, guys, no, you lost the final by forfeiture. And so they lose the final, that's Senegal, based on appeal. And the appeals body, the appeal lodged by the Federation of Moroccan Football, is declared admissible in form, and the appeal is upheld. And then they say the CAF disciplinary decision is set aside. That's a disciplinary decision that was made in the aftermath of the shenanigans of that final. But in arriving to this decision, CAF say that it is declared that the Federation Senegalese de Football, through the conduct of its team, infringed Article 82 of the regulations of Africa Cup of Nations. That's true. And then they go on, in addition, to say, in application of Article 84 of the regulations of Africa Cup of Nations, the Senegal team is declared to have forfeited the match, with the result recorded as 3-0 in favor of Morocco. Now, what do those rules particularly state? The Article 82 and 84 that are being cited in this decision. First and foremost, here's what they say. Rule 82 talks about, or Article 82 talks about refusal to play and abandonment. So, in other words, for a moment, we know that Senegal refused to play. They had abandoned the game in protest of the decisions from the referee. The article says, that article defines that the act of a team withdrawing from a match already in progress. It states that if a team refuses to play or leaves the ground before the end of the match without permission of the referee, and there was no permission of the referee, the team shall be considered the loser. Mark those keywords, that if a team refuses to play or leaves the ground before the end of the match without the permission of the referee, and to be honest, this is what actually happened. Senegal had refused to continue on. They left the ground without the permission of the referee and went to the dressing room. Therefore, they have flouted the rules. That's true. And then, so the trigger. So a team walking off the pitch in protest, as seen with the Senegalese final after the VR decision, we know what happened. So let's go on to Article 84, what the sanctions are in regards to that. It says, now, Article 84 outlines the specific penalties that follow a violation of Article 82. It serves as the enforcement mechanism for teams that forfeit through their conduct. So, in this particular case, it says that a team that violates Article 82 loses the match by a score of 3-0. Remember, by the time those incidents happened, the match was goalless. There was no goal in that match. So, unless the opponent was already leading by a wider margin at the time of walk-off. In other words, had Senegal been leading by 4-0, this would not have stood, regardless of the rules. In which case, that score stands. Then, permanent elimination. A team is officially declared to have forfeited the match and it is eliminated from the tournament. And then there's a fine and suspension. Additional financial penalties and suspensions for the coaching staff and players involved are usually triggered under this article in conjunction with the CAF disciplinary code. That is the verdict that we saw in the aftermath of that final. Just a quick recap on what the verdict was in terms of penalties. For example, the Senegalese head coach was handed a five-match ban for official CAF matches for his unsporting conduct. In addition to that, he was fined $100,000. Then they went on to suspend team players. That was Ilman Chak Ndiaye for 2 games, and then for his unsporting behavior towards the referee. Then they also suspended Ismail Sarr for 2 official CAF matches for his unsporting behavior. And then there's a couple of other fines, including fining the Federation of Senegalese Football to a tune of $300,000. And then also that they were further fined another $300,000 for unsporting conduct of their players and technical staff in violation of CAF disciplinary code, among other fines, because there's another $15,000 fine. Then also Morocco had its own fines, including fines and penalties to Akraf Hakimi, who was handed a 2 official CAF match ban, with 1 match being suspended for a period of 1 year. Then Ismail Salabia was suspended for 3 matches and then fined $100,000. Then the Moroccan Federation fined $200,000 for the behavior of the ball boys. And then now that fine for the ball boys of $200,000 in the new verdict has been reduced to, I think, about $10,000. Then the Moroccan Federation was also fined an extra $100,000 for the conduct of their team players who invaded the VAR review and area and obstructed the referee's work in violation of the principles of fair play and integrity as stated in Article 82 and 83 of the CAF disciplinary code. So really, you can see that is what happened in the aftermath of Senegal winning the final. But for me, what they stain on African football here is that although the rules state that walking off or refusal to play are grounds for dismissal, are grounds for losing the game by forfeiture and elimination from the tournament, the mere fact that the Moroccan team returned to the pitch and played on, and then Morocco accepted to play, as did Senegal, that meant that they had sort of, in a way, or figuratively speaking, suspended those rules, as if. Now, 2 months later, you come back to say that they have lost the final. And I like this opinion that comes in from Ben Jacobs. He says, although AFCON rules state walking off or refusing to play for a prolonged period is grounds for elimination, the decision to strip Senegal of the AFCON title 2 months after their trophy lift is a bad look for CAF. It should be within the power of officials in real time to disqualify a team, but it's a hollow victory for Morocco to appeal and win in this manner weeks after the trophy lift. Morocco accepted Senegal's return from their 10-minute walk-off, gladly resumed play and took their penalty. Missing it, losing the game, and then appealing to gain the trophy doesn't sit right, even if by the letter of the law there are grounds to do so. So, in terms of the letter of the law, that's what CAF have done. They've applied the rules to the letter of the law, and you cannot hold it against them. But that's why I started off saying that this does not look good on CAF when it comes to the optics. It does not look good. The decision to award Morocco the 2025 Africa Cup of Nations. The question is, what are your views about this topic? What do you think this means for African football? What do you think this means for Senegal? What does this mean for Morocco? Are they going to hold a trophy parade? Are they going to hold a party for this triumph? Do those Senegalese players get stripped of their medals to say, CAF writes to them and says, please bring back those medals, bring back the trophy, and then we organize the ceremony and hand it over to Morocco? Because this is a boardroom triumph. At the end of the day, nothing is going to change that. It will stand that it was not a triumph on the pitch. It was a triumph in the boardroom. And there's nothing that people hate like boardroom triumphs in football. Your views about that decision and much more. We're going to continue the discussion on this topic and more in our subsequent live broadcasts. But do let me know what your thoughts are down in the comment section on this video. Thank you and stay blessed. Bye-bye for now.